Hi, my name is Mr. Jones. I teach orchestra at Whatcom Middle School. Welcome to the family. This video will show you just a little bit about each instrument so you can make a decision, if you haven't already, about what you're interested in playing. We'll start at the bottom of the orchestra with
the bass.
The bass is usually played standing up or sitting on a stool, and that's what we usually teach. It can be plucked with the fingers, of course, but most of the time we do use a bow. The bass is used in lots of different music. Of course, it's used in jazz and some rock and roll and other music forms, but usually in orchestra we use the bow most of the time. And the strings on the bass from low to high go E, A, D, G. Now, remembering that can be tricky at first, but I've got a trick for you. But we have to wait until we hear the violin first before you know the bass trick, because the bass strings are the reverse order of the violin. So once you memorize violin, you just flip it around in your head. So the strings for the bass. And that A is really out of tune. Now if you didn't hear that pitch change, don't worry. It's really hard to hear the low strings, and I did move it just very, very slightly, but you know that even just a little bit of change in pitch can really make a song sound great or not so great. So we really pay close attention to the exact pitch, the exact note, how in tune it is. So that's the bass. And it's also called sometimes the double bass, or a stand-up bass, or a bass fiddle. And I think even, contrabass is another word that we see and use all the time. So stand-up bass, I think I said them all, acoustic bass. It's got a lot of names because a lot of people use it to play all kinds of music. So the next one up from the bottom of the lowest notes, the pyramid of our orchestra that we build, the next one up is called the cello. So we'll say
hello to the cello.
The cello is a lot like the bass, just a little bit smaller, and we definitely sit down playing this one. We always have to sit down to play the cello, I mean almost always. And we use the bow most of the time, but of course we can pluck too. It does have also a little spike at the bottom, we call the end pin. The bass also has one too, and the strings of the cello from lowest to high is cats, C, go, G, down, D, alleys, A. Cats, go, down, alleys. That's the names of the strings for the cello, C, G, D, and A, and we use a bow very similar to all the other bows in the orchestra family. And the next one up is the viola. Oops, I forgot my shoulder rest. So the viola is a lot like a violin, and I'll show you in comparison when I get the violin out. It's a lot like a violin in its size. It's just a little bigger, and it plays lower notes. It actually plays the same, it actually has the same strings as a cello, C, G, D, and A, so you can remember cats, go, down, alleys. It plays kind of the in-between notes. It's not really capable of playing the low bass notes of the cello and the bass, but it can still play a lot of the high notes that a violin plays, but it has this dark, rich character that we can't live without in our rainbow orchestra. You know, just like a community, or a band, or a school, or a nation, there's this rich tapestry, this rich mix of all kinds of people, and we always need our violas. People kind of make fun of violas sometimes, so remember that even though we tease each other, no one can do what the viola does. That sound is there for a reason, and after, you know, a couple hundred years, so the sound of the viola, open strings, there are same as the cello, as I said, cats, go, down, alleys. And as I went over to get my shoulder rest, that's something you can notice, that we almost always use a shoulder rest. Some students really don't want to use one in the beginning stages because it's a little uncomfortable, and especially if it's not adjusted right, if it's a little tall or a little small, or if you just haven't found the right place for it to sit on you. But in the long run, 99% of the people that I've ever played with in all of my professional experience and all of my learning, 99% of us use a shoulder rest of some sort, whether that's a little bit of some foam or even just sort of a cloth sometimes. So most of us use those, and we can often provide those for you. But if you can afford to grab one, if you're renting an instrument, or if you want to keep your own and have it for your instrument, it's a good idea to buy one. They're not terribly expensive. Let me know if you need help getting one. But the viola has the same strings as the cello, and it uses a bow most of the time as well, and it's played on the shoulder. Violists and violinists, when you're taking lessons, usually play standing up, and a lot of professionals, if they can, will stand up when they play. Just in orchestra, we usually sit, just for the equality of the sound. I think we don't want them sticking out. It's also hard to see over the top of somebody who's standing up, so watching the conductor's kind of important. Kinda. So the viola, and then of course the violin is a lot like the viola, and I'll show you the comparison. They're very similar. You can see it's just a little bit bigger. The viola's a little bit bigger and the violin's a little bit smaller. They're a little bit thinner usually too. You probably can't see that very well, but it's a little bit thinner. But the violin has 4 strings also, and again, most violinists use some sort of shoulder support, and again, it might not feel just right when you first start, and even for a couple months it might not feel comfortable. If it really hurts, we got to find something to make it better, something to mitigate that. But if it's just uncomfortable,
give it some time.
so almost always we use shoulder rest. Okay, shoulder rest talk over. The strings of the violin are from thick to thin. Again, I start from the low strings. Good dogs always eat. Good dogs always eat. That was G, D, A, E. And that's the reverse of the bass. The bass actually from their low strings to their high strings, and I always try to talk about things from low to high, just like you would build a house. But usually we build the house from the bottom up, so always from low to high when you're memorizing strings, okay? Good dogs always eat. So the bass has E, A, D, G. I don't have a really good rhyme for that one. I don't have a good mnemonic device for that. How would you spell E, A, D, G? I haven't thought of a good one. Elephants always dance greatly. Come up with a good one for bass for me. Otherwise, you just have to memorize the violin one. Good dogs always eat. And now I'll take you through a little bit of what they sound like and what they look like. So holding the instrument, we put it on our shoulder, and watch that you're not in front of your nose and you're not in front of your ear over here. It's got to be somewhere in the middle, and make sure you're not droopy and that you're not too high, somewhere in the middle. And of course there is some very important things to learn about how we hold this bow, and that's kind of a lifetime learning experience. I'm always learning things about my bow hold, so don't worry if you don't get it right away, or if you've always got something to improve. Join the club. We all have bow hold work to do. So your posture looks something like this. When you're sitting, our posture should look something like this. Okay, so you notice that I'm sitting with pretty good posture, I hope. My hips are rolled sort of backwards. Even one leg can be sort of relaxed, and my spine is nice and tall, and everything's sort of just falling off of my spine in a relaxed sort of manner. We want to use the arm weight to make a big sound. We don't want to be tight. So there's basic posture. I'll stand to play a little bit for you. Here's some of what your first sounds sound like. At first you'll pluck single notes. That was a song called Morning Dance. Some of you probably have played it before. And once we make our first bow sounds, it might even sound like this. That's That's how simple we start. So you can do it. Don't worry. It'll come in time. It might sound like this at first, though, because if you don't know how to stroke the string, it might sound kind of rough. That's the kind of thing we see when you're first trying your first sounds. So don't be afraid. If that happens, that's normal. Keep going. Don't stop and give up. Keep making sounds. Let's see. Oh, so that beginner song, once we've got our bow hold down and our fingers comfortable at making the shape they need to make in the right places, here's how morning dance sounds with the bow. Okay, and the first year beginner usually can play this song pretty well. So here is Can Can on the violin. And it goes on more than that, but that's the Can Can on there. And then I'll play a piece that is maybe a end of 6th grade song, 7th grade song, could be an 8th grade song, depends on how much time you get to put in the instrument and how quickly you become comfortable with the skills.
We see that nobody really has any set abilities as teachers, right? We talk about growth mindset. Remember that?
And so remember that no matter how you play, you can always get better. So I'll play on each one so you can get a sound. A little bit of a Bach minuet. So this song is like 300 years old, right? A man from Germany named Johann Sebastian Bach wrote this little piece, I think, for keyboards, right? For a harpsichord, which is kind of like a piano. But it's a great demo piece, and I can play it on all the instruments pretty good. So, violin, this is what a, 7th grader could play. 6th graders, if you really work hard, you can get there. And so, the Bach minuet. So that's how the violin plays once you've got the hang of it. And I'll play a fun piece on each one too. The fun piece that I like to do on the violin is a fiddle tune. And the fiddle tune is called Shove the Pig's Foot a Little Further in the Fire. And it's not about eating pork. It's not about eating pork, all of my vegan friends. It is actually, the pig's foot is now I can't remember what it was. It's a type of a tool, I want to say for a fire poker or something. Oh, I gotta look it up and tell you later, but shove the pig's foot a little further in the fire. Really out of tune. And we'll keep going back down the pyramid to the viola. So the viola, same kind of thing as the violin, same general idea, although violas are a little bigger, so sometimes there's some different jockeying that you have to do as far as how you play the viola, but generally it's a lot like the violin. Your first sounds, if you wanted to play morning dance with plucking on the viola, this nice dark rich sound. And then if you did it with the bow, the same song. And then a beginner song that most of us learn in first year orchestra is Can Can. I like it on the viola better than I liked it on the violin. And then morning dance Can Can. Oh, and then here's the Bach minuet. The same piece, just a little bit lower. A fifth lower, a perfect fifth. As in 5/5. If you want to know the fancy word for it, because the strings of the viola are 5 notes lower. So here's the minuet. Let me start again. that's the viola sound with a, end of 6th grade, 7th grade song. A lot of private lesson students can play that song after they've studied, depending on how early you started, after they studied for a year or so. Then a fun piece on the viola I thought of for you guys would be from a famous piece of music called Peer Gynt. It's spelled Peergynt. I think I got that right. And that's the name of a guy, Peter. It's a Norwegian story, but one famous part of this song for sure. Everybody's heard it. It's called In the Hall of the Mountain King, when he's sneaking around in a troll's, if I have that right, in a troll's kingdom in his castle. So I'll try and play that a little bit for you because it really fits the viola well. I need the music for that. I almost forgot it. Had to take 3 times at it. But that's the viola. It's got that dark, rich chocolate sound. Yes, I'm hungry. So the viola, that's some of the fun. Oh, and the fun song of the viola, the Mountain King story. Okay, and we'll step down to the cello. And just like the violin and the viola had the shoulder rest, cellos and basses have something important too. This is called an end pin strap. So the stick that comes out of the bottom is called an end pin. And we use this strap to keep it from sliding around on the floor. You can use what's called a donut, which is just a little circle. But a lot of times those are really slippery. These are what everybody I know really likes to use. And they're not very expensive if you need one for your own house. If you have carpet at your house, you don't really need one when you're practicing at home. In our room, we have a slippery floor, so we need them here. But also, a piece of plywood does just as good of a job, or better sometimes. It's just harder to carry around. So you can stick this in your pocket or your backpack. So it does have that need. We have enough usually for all of our students. But if you want to have your own, it's a good idea to get one, especially if you have slippery floors at home. So we put that on the ground and we stick the chair leg through the hole. And then we can put our end pin in the little holes so that it doesn't slide around on us. So the cello, first sounds. Here's a beginner song for that beginner song called Morning Dance, plucking. Okay, when you're getting comfortable with the bow and you play with the bow, it sounds like this. Yes, we've got even more into those dark, rich tones as we get lower and lower in the orchestra. And I didn't play some beginner sounds on the viola, I did on the violin. Beginner sounds on the cello might sound like this. Okay, you're going to hear some scratches and some squeakies. It happens. The important thing is keep going and study why you think it's going this way. One of the best ways is to video yourself and look at how your bow is going, because if the bow is going straight, okay, I'm already teaching. This is just an introduction.
Move on, Mr. Jones.
And bows, and a beginner song that you hear, Can. Okay, that's a 6th grade kind of end of the year, first year song. And then the Bach Minuet, which is a more advanced beginner song. And then a fun song on this one, since this is my main instrument. I've studied the cello since I was a little kid. I grew up in Ferndale and I took lessons from a lady here in Bellingham named Kathy Hayward. And my orchestra teacher in Ferndale is still there. She doesn't teach orchestra anymore, but she's still there, and I still kind of take lessons from her. I always ask for her advice when I can. So, hi, Mrs. Donnellan. The cello fun song I'll demonstrate for you, and I'll play the whole thing, so you can skip ahead in the video if you don't want to listen to it, but I'll try to play the whole thing. The song is called Prelude, and prelude means just a thing that happens before the main thing.
You know, like before the big football game, they've got a lot of interviews and special announcements, and they sing the national anthem and stuff like that. So that's the prelude before the big game. So the song is actually called Prelude. It's part of a bigger set of music. It's only about 2.5 minutes long, 3 minutes long, and the rest of the piece of music that includes other parts is actually, a lot longer. It has 4 other parts to it: an allemande, a courant, a sarabande.
These are French words, and they're not important right now, Mr. Jones. Just demonstrate the instrument. So here is the Prelude from Bach's first unaccompanied suite for cello. So that's a fun piece on the cello. And
The bass.
so the first bass sounds that we have, if you pluck that same song on the morning dance on the bass, it sounds like this. Once you get the bow comfortable with those notes, and another note about tuning, of course, tuning your own instrument is difficult. Using the fine tuners, okay, most of our instruments have these very small knobs down here. That's usually okay. As long as you have a tuner on a phone or a tablet or on your computer. I think we have some available with the software that we'll be using this year, but we haven't got that squared away yet, so I'm not sure. But with a tuner, using those fine tuners is okay. But the pegs, the top ones up here, these bigger pegs, these are tuners also. They're really tricky, and you can break strings really easily, and strings can be expensive. We want to avoid breaking those. So we don't usually tune with the pegs until you've been trained on it, and usually that means somebody sitting next to you and working with it, or doing some work with someone who knows in class, or doing it in class while I'm watching everybody practice. And so at first, stay away from the pegs. Our local violin shop, Quist Violins, is willing to tune instruments for us, which is a great help because it's hard for us as a school that's trying to keep distance from each other to save lives. We try not to handle things back and forth as much as possible, so Mr. Quist is able to be a point of contact for us, and there will be some times when we'll be able to help, of course, to reach out to us if you're having trouble. We want you to have a functioning instrument at home. But as far as tuning goes, you see me tuning and you're not sure how to do it by ear, that's okay. We won't expect you to for a long time. Most even amateur players, a lot of players through college will still use their tuners all the time. It's important to develop your ear if you go into high school and beyond. I mean, well, even from day one, you should develop your ear, learning to hear what out of tune and in tune sounds like and how to change that with your fingers. But if you can't hear it with your ears, of course, we'll use electronic tuners or my ear when we're together to tune. So, more about the instrument.
Bass.
Your beginning bass sounds might sound like this. Bass is the trickiest one to get a nice, thick, clean sound. But after a while, you'll get there, I'm sure. It's all about the bow. It's all about the bow hold. And it's all about our bow speed and our weight, the heaviness of the bow, the heaviness of your arm, and the placement and the direction of your rubbing. And sometimes strings just don't like you and they just honk at you. There's times you heard a few mistakes I made. You're going to hear some honks and some squeaks. The important thing is to just keep playing. The important thing is to study other people who are better than you and try and copy what they do. Try and learn from them. So, last instrument, the bass. You've heard the beginner songs, and once you get comfortable on the bass, you can play Can too. Okay, wish me luck. The bass has different fingerings. I keep messing up. Give me another try. I haven't practiced in a while. But that's the sound of the bass. But they can play the same kind of music that everybody else can. There is solo works for the bass that play up and down really high and really fast too. It can play almost everything. Well, bass players would say everything. They can play everything that the cello can play, and the viola and the violin in some cases. But of course, there's some limits to every instrument. Otherwise, the orchestra would be full of basses, right? So we do need our violin friends. We do need our violin friends as much as we would like to have a bass orchestra or a cello orchestra. But we do that sometimes too, though. It's pretty fun. There's a first year song, and then I'll give the Bach minuet a try. I need the book. And then a fun song on the bass is really fun and easy to do too, but the only instrument that can really make this sound is the bass. So I'll play you a little bit of that scary music from the movie called Jaws. So, the violin, the viola, the cello, and the bass, that's what makes up our orchestra family. Welcome to the family, and I'm looking forward to learning with you. I forgot to mention something to think about with the instruments too, is hopefully when we're able to come back to school at some point, transportation of the instruments can be a challenge because you do have to practice at home to make our orchestra the best that it possibly can be. And oftentimes we're able to place a bass in a home, or sometimes bass players will find an extra time to practice at school. There's usually a way we can find a window in the schedule to practice together. Or sometimes they'll take it home. One person will take it home one weekend, and the next weekend another person can take it home. So that usually requires a van or an SUV of some sort. If you can lay the back seats down, you can usually fit a bass in there. My teacher, one of the teachers that taught me, actually fit his bass into a Honda Civic, which a lot of you might not know what a Honda Civic is, but it's a pretty tiny car. He had a Honda Civic hatchback and a full-size bass. His full-size bass fit in there. The neck was laid up right next to the shifting, what do you call that? The shifter, right in the middle. So transportation might be a concern that you might have to think about. They're not allowed on school buses. Bases are too big for that. And cellos as well. Cellos are not allowed on the school buses when you're thinking about that. For now, it's not a decision we have to worry about. But as far as the size of the instrument goes, it might be something that you think about. Very, very on the smaller armed and smaller legged people can play the bass. If you feel like you're not worried that you're not strong enough or your arms aren't long enough, that's not really a factor. We have a few smaller sized basses, and if it's really the one that your heart calls you to and you try it and you think it's great, go for it. But generally, bass players are usually sometimes the bigger, longer armed people. It requires a little more force with the fingers, but not a lot more than the cello. And at first, everybody's really weak at it, and you have to develop your fingers and your calluses, the hardness of the tips of your fingers. And it's hard at first for everybody. But generally, you want to think about, are you ready to tackle a big instrument like this? The cello is a little bit more effort too, and you have to be able to, again, transport that instrument. And it also depends on what we have available as I start to see what everybody needs and what school instruments we have to share, or maybe what instruments you are able to rent. So keep that in mind about the size of the instruments. This thing takes up a good amount of space, and you have to be able to find a place if you're going to be practicing at home, and I hope you can. We're going to be working this out as we go. Find a place where it's safe, away from pets and little humans that aren't aware of how to treat the instrument. Once you've learned a little bit about it, everybody in your family will know how to take care of it and how to be safe around it. But little humans often need to be, we need to protect our instruments from our little brothers and sisters. So keep that in mind. It does require a bit of space, the cello as well, and it's the best thing if you can leave it out of its case to practice. Putting it in its case is a lot safer, of course, and violins and violas, you just put it away and it's done. But the cello, it's kind of a pain to get it in and out, and especially the bass too. Generally, we'd like you to be able to leave it out. You can get a cello stand or make one too. Sometimes you can find a design for a stand, or you just set it down. Because if you can just pick it up and go, instead of having to unzip it and take the bow out, you're going to be much more likely to practice. So a few things to keep in mind about cello and bass. You can't transport them on school buses. Hopefully when we get to go back on the school bus again sometime soon. You have to be able to find some transportation for your instrument. And there's always a solution. There's always a friend or an uncle or an auntie or a friend's mom or dad. There's always a way if you want to put in the time and the effort to build your skill on this instrument. We can find a way to help you. But keep that in mind. It might be part of the decision you make with your family about what you want to pursue in orchestra. And I think that's all I had to add. See you soon.